The Bombing Trial and Justice. By the time you hear this, Timothy McVeigh may have been convicted of the various crimes associated with bombing the federal building in Oklahoma City. Personally, I do not have much doubt that McVeigh is guilty of being involved in those murders. But, like many people, I do have some significant doubts about the case that was developed by the government to prosecute the suspects. At the time of McVeigh's arrest, I wrote that it seemed a little too easy to arrest him and then just one other person. A little too easy because clearly McVeigh is not smart enough to have committed such a crime without some help behind the scenes, and not stupid enough to have simply filled a truck with fertilizer and dropped it off expecting not to be caught. After all, what sort of an idiot commits the crime of the century and then drives away in a getaway car without license plates? As I understand it, the people involved with the patriot and militia movements also think the trial is something of a sham, but for very different reasons. The right wing thinks that McVeigh should not, rightly, be convicted because, 1, the reasons I've mentioned above, there's clearly more going on here. 2, the government is so corrupt that it cannot be trusted to try any person accused of such a crime. And 3, the whole course of the trial avoids the larger issues raised by the bombing, such as, what should the government be doing differently so that it does not treat people in such a way that they come to think that blowing buildings up is a necessary course of action? We need not discuss the failures of the government's case at this point. There would seem to be much left for people to discover in the future. What is more interesting is the right-wing claim that the government should be behaving differently and that its treatment of McVeigh and handling of the case are indicative of its failures. This claim is complicated, and at some level simply true. Working people in this country are no doubt aware of the myriad of ways in which the government has made their lives more difficult, or at least failed in its obligation to provide some benefit for taxes paid. Here in the West, these claims against the government have often involved land disputes, property taxes, and property rights. In short, small ranchers and farmers, and those who just wish to have a little space, are being squeezed to death by the government and its regulations. Some of these people also believe that there exists some sort of a conspiracy by the United Nations to take over the world. Some people are clearly insane, but that's a different commentary. It's true that the little people are being removed from their land, losing it to tax obligations and other debts with which they cannot keep pace. And it's true that the government has been the immediate source of many of these problems. And yes, some of these problems do actually involve government regulations that are senseless, although some are necessary but seem like an imposition upon the individual small property owner, like environmental protections. The other concern about the trial raised by the right wing is the whole question of the legitimacy of this government bringing a would-be revolutionary, of sorts, to trial. Some on the right have claimed that McVeigh's actions were justified and necessary. I cannot agree with this point of view, mostly because it's devoid of moral logic, but it's important to be aware of these tendencies in the population. Even that portrayal is not quite accurate. Many people would agree that the current government lacks the moral authority to try anyone, and certainly it lacks the moral authority to condemn those who reject its authority. But the right wing does not phrase the issue in quite these terms. The patriot and militia types have bought into an ideology based on individual power and right, which sees government itself, which also means democracy itself, as the problem. So to these people, it is not just the current government, but government in principle, which causes people trouble. The right-wing analysis is, of course, fundamentally and deeply flawed. The real problem facing all working people, including small farmers and ranchers, is the class bias in the government. The current government is a problem, not because democracy is a problem, but because this government serves the interests of the enemy class. It serves the interests of the very wealthy to the detriment of the rest of us. That which the ruling class calls democracy, the dictatorship of the wealthy, is the problem. Real democracy is the solution. This is Richard Curtis.